Let me introduce to you our next speaker. We will be watching a remote video presentation by Stanford Carmack. Stanford has a linguistics and a law degree from Stanford University, as well as a doctorate in Hispanic languages and literature from the University of California, Santa Barbara, specializing in historical syntax and textual analysis. He currently researches Book of Mormon syntax and lexis as they relate to English usage, and contributes to aspects of the Book of Mormon critical text project carried out by Royal Skousen. And we will turn to the video now.
Today I will be speaking about Book of Moses English and what it can tell us about the authorship of the text. That is, whether words were revealed to Joseph Smith in 1830 or whether ideas were revealed to him. Though it is a short text compared to the Book of Mormon, it still provides us with a considerable amount of quantifiable data that we can compare to other texts. The version of the Book of Moses that I used for my analysis was the transcription found on the Joseph Smith Papers website called Old Testament Revision 1. I marked every word according to whether it is found in the book of Genesis or whether it is language that is original to the Revelation. In that way, I made a word cruncher ebook that is precisely searchable. Here we can see a short segment of the ebook that I made. Original language is in white and Genesis language is in green. Other colors were used in the ebook to highlight other aspects of the transcription. The words of the Book of Moses can be broken down as you see in this table. The first chapter is 100% original, and so is the 7th chapter. Overall, 72% of the language is original. When I say Book of Moses in this presentation, I am referring to original non-biblical words, not the words also found in the book of Genesis. I compared the Book of Moses with several relevant texts and corpora. I compared it with the original Book of Mormon text and with the King James Bible. I used the Latter-day Saint Scriptures version of the Bible available in Word Cruncher, as well as an ebook of the original 1611 text, which includes the Apocrypha. I also compared Book of Moses English with pseudo-archaic or pseudo-biblical writings, looking at 25 of them. 12 of these have more than 10,000 words. I also compared the Book of Moses with Joseph Smith's early writings found in his letters up to 1833, and also his personal history of 1832. Finally, I compared Book of Moses English with the greater textual record, looking at more than 10 billion words from the late 1400s to the early 1800s. I examined 30 different linguistic features in the Book of Moses that were archaic or seemed out of the ordinary. After comparing usage, I found the following. 86% of the features I singled out are found in the Book of Mormon, but only 37% are found in the King James Bible. 44% are found in 25 pseudo-archaic texts, and only 30% in Joseph Smith's early writings. All of the linguistic features are found in early modern English. Here we can see most of the table containing a comparison of the 30 linguistic features I examined. The evidence suggests that an early modern perspective of the text might provide the most complete explanation of the language. In other words, it's possible that an English language text with many linguistic features of the early modern period was revealed to Joseph Smith in 1830. Let's look at some of the evidence for that position. Of the 30 features I looked at, 6 of them had enough examples where there was a pattern of usage created by at least 19 individual instances. 2 of these patterns involve the past tense, either positive or negative. A third pattern is made up of relative pronoun usage after personal antecedents. Another pattern is one of lexical variation between the conjunctive adverbs therefore and wherefore. Another pattern involves the auxiliary verbs shall and will, which are used to express the future tense. And the 6th pattern is subject auxiliary placement. For the positive past tense, I noted instances of the simple past and the periphrastic past, exemplified by flourished and did flourish. For the negative past tense, I noted instances of the type beheld not versus the type did not behold. And I looked at relative pronouns used after personal antecedents, noting whether they were that, which, or who. I noted non-interrogative uses of wherefore along with therefore. In large databases of English, wherefore was never more frequent than therefore, but wherefore was at its most frequent in the first third of the early modern period. Shall was more frequent than will in the early modern period, but after that time, will became more frequent. For subject auxiliary order, I looked at I have versus have I, and I will versus I will I, in non-interrogative context. Relatively high inversion rates are a sign of greater archaism. In the early modern period, the auxiliary did rarely marked contrast or emphasis in affirmative declarative context. It was almost always a marker of the past tense. These are the only three with periphrastic did in the Book of Moses, and they are not modern in character. That is, they are not emphatic or contrastive. Moses did again receive his natural strength, and Eve also his wife did labor with him, and they were blessed upon the mountains and upon the high places, and did flourish. The text has low levels of periphrastic did, below 2%, and so it is biblical in this regard. The Book of Moses pattern is also similar to what is found in many pseudo-archaic texts, but it doesn't have the Book of Mormon's distinctive pattern of high levels of periphrastic did, which exceeds 25% of past tense usage. In the Book of Moses, most of the negative past tense takes the archaic form without did, such as he beheld not. The example shown here is the only instance of the more modern form with did, and there was not a particle of it which he did not behold, discerning it by the Spirit of God. Nevertheless, this more modern form was also used in the early modern period, with frequency increasing through the decades. This table shows that the Book of Moses has a low rate of the more modern did not usage, 5%, which compares closely with the rate found in the Book of Genesis. In contrast, the Book of Mormon is quite heavy in did not usage. Pseudo-archaic writings lie in between, and Joseph Smith's own usage was more modern. In early modern English, there were three possible personal relative pronouns, which we are familiar with from the Bible: that, which, and who or whom. These were synonymous. Personal that is the dominant form of the King James Bible, and who is the dominant form of the modern period, which usually is taken to begin in 1701. In the early modern database, when we drill down to individual decades, personal which was never as heavy as personal that, although there were early modern authors who favored the use of which, as we see in the Book of Moses and the Book of Mormon. A pattern of heavy personal which and lesser amounts of that and who is a less common early modern pattern. We can see in this table that the Book of Moses does not have the pattern found in Joseph Smith's early writings. The patterns are quite different. We can see in this next table that the Book of Moses does not have the pattern of the Book of Genesis. They are also quite different. We can see in this next table that the patterns of the Book of Moses and the Book of Mormon are quite similar in this regard. They are not statistically distinct, even with more than 1,600 instances in the Book of Mormon. Personal which occurring with pronominal antecedents is a sign of either real archaism or well-imitated archaism. There are no pseudo-archaic examples of this specific usage. Here's a biblical example from Deuteronomy. The Lord thy God is he which goeth over before thee. In modern versions, he which is often rendered as the one who. The Book of Moses has one instance of same which. That Satan whom thou hast commanded in the name of mine only begotten is the same which was from the beginning. There are no pseudo-archaic examples in the 25 texts, and there's only one example each in the King James Bible and the Book of Mormon. The Book of Moses has one instance of him which, even him which he declared should come in the meridian of time, which was prepared from before the foundation of the world. There are 16 biblical examples where him is the antecedent. The original Book of Mormon text has 2 instances. The Book of Moses has one instance of these which. But behold, these which thine eyes are upon shall perish in the floods. As shown, there are 5 in the Bible and 2 in the Book of Mormon. Next to consider is the pattern of therefore and wherefore, the latter in non-interrogative contexts. The Book of Moses has a very high rate of wherefore usage, as does the last part of the dictation of the Book of Mormon. Also, one longer pseudo-archaic text has this heavy wherefore usage, the earliest one published in 1740. But the Book of Genesis and the first part of the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith's early writings have a low rate of wherefore usage. As an aside, the changing therefore wherefore variation found in the Book of Mormon has been noted before. This variation and whosoever variation are 2 linguistic features that show a dramatic shift in usage rates. However, there are other features that switch in the text, and the switch is not always toward greater archaism for the latter part of the dictation. Therefore, the changing character of Joseph Smith's 1829 dictation of the Book of Mormon is a complex matter, and from what I've seen so far, it looks like it would have been quite difficult for him to control all of the changing linguistic features. This is a topic worth exploring further. The shall-will variation of the Book of Moses is archaic, as it is in the Book of Genesis. It is also the pattern of the Book of Mormon and many pseudo-archaic writings as well. The frequency of archaic shall-will variation in these writings shows that this archaic pattern was not too difficult to produce or imitate. One final thing to note is that Joseph Smith's early writings clearly show that he preferred will over shall, which is the modern pattern. As an aside, let me say that many features of Joseph's dialect were not archaic. It shared many features with standard American English. The final pattern I looked at was subject-auxiliary order involving the auxiliaries have and will and the subject pronoun I. The rate of inversion is quite high in the Book of Moses, even higher than in the Book of Genesis. By the modern period, the inversion rate with these auxiliary verbs was quite low, as can be seen in the Ngram viewer. We can also see that the Book of Moses pattern was not Joseph Smith's native pattern. By way of summary, the past tense usage of the Book of Moses in either positive or negative context is not the Book of Mormon's pattern, although it is still archaic. So in the Book of Moses, we have the flourish type and very little of the did flourish type. In the Book of Mormon, the did flourish type is present more than 1/4 of the time, but less than 2% of the time in the Book of Moses. Beheld not in the Book of Moses is the dominant type. Did not behold is the dominant type in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon's distinctive heavy paraphrastic did pattern is found in at least one longer pseudo-archaic text, although the Book of Mormon does have a few early modern features not found in that text. Next, the Book of Moses' pattern of personal relative pronoun variation is the same as the Book of Mormon's, heavy and personal which. The pattern has not been found in any pseudo-archaic text. The pattern was, however, an uncommon one of the early modern era. Thus, based on pseudo-archaic evidence, it seems that Joseph Smith, working from revealed ideas, was more likely to reproduce the Book of Mormon's did usage in the Book of Moses, and he was less likely to reproduce its personal relative pronoun pattern. I also considered 24 additional linguistic features. Several of these are not found in the Book of Mormon, but they are found in the early modern period. The verb seek used to be employed with a meaning of pursuing with hostile intent. The last example in the Oxford English Dictionary comes from a Shakespeare play. The expression in Moses 8 is they sought Noah to take away his life. Here the verb seek has the older meaning. It is language that doesn't occur in the Bible or in the Book of Mormon in this way. Here are 4 matching examples I was able to find in the textual record so far. These are mostly from the early modern period. Moses 5:11 looks like it originally had 2 instances of bad grammar. Were it not for our transgression, we should never had seed and should never had known good and evil. These have been edited. The reason we see this language here is that they are the concluding part of a counterfactual construction. The counterfactual clause is, were it not for our transgression. Then there are 2 conditional clauses. The first one reads, we should never had seed. We expect we should never have had seed. We should never have had seed. Also, in the modern period, conditional should begins to be expressed with would in this context. There is one similar construction in the Book of Mormon in Alma 13, but the auxiliary verb is might, not should. If it had not been for this, they might had as great privilege as their brethren. Here are 2 early modern examples of this language. There are more than these in the early English books database. I chose these excerpts because they have very similar language. We should never have plus a noun phrase. We should never had this free acknowledgement. We should never had so many unpreaching doctors and prelates. In the modern period, the conditional part of a counterfactual begins to be expressed more and more with would instead of should. Next, we see this odd language with a past participle, known, where instead of had, we expect have. We should never had known good and evil. In the modern period, this usage persisted to a degree with would, not should. Here are 3 matching early modern instances of this syntax. Even-handed treatments of Book of Moses English will not only mention its bad grammar, but also its good grammar, such as its subjunctive usage. In this interesting case, past subjunctive forms are triggered twice by the conjunction except. I could not look upon God except his glory should come upon me and I were transfigured before him. The first one is marked by should. The second one doesn't have auxiliary marking. The subjunctive is signaled by singular were. This is a rare combination. The only one I have found with this configuration after searching through more than 10 billion words is this 1629 excerpt. Now, except their hypocrisy should be discovered in time, and that their outside were removed and made as rotten as the inside, how should his name rot? Next, we see some bad grammar. These words was spoken unto Moses in the mount. A perfect matching example from the early modern period comes from the famous author of the Pilgrim's Progress, John Bunyan. These words was spoken to the Jewish Christians. Plural was also occurs in the Book of Moses after personal which 3 times, as we see in these 2 passages. All the children of men which was and which was created of the same, and this is the genealogy of the sons of God, which was the sons of Adam. Assigning the plural was of the text to Joseph Smith is a doubtful enterprise, as it co-occurs with language that he probably would not have used had he been dictating from revealed ideas. Similar examples to these do exist in the early modern period. Here we see some examples of finite complementation after the verbs cause and command. The Book of Mormon is a good model for this, but this is not typical pseudo-archaic usage. Infinitival complementation was highly dominant after the verb cause in English, especially with pronouns, as we see in Moses 4. I caused that he should be cast down. As for the verb command, the complex finite was very rare by 1830, especially with pronouns, as 3 of these excerpts have. For instance, in Moses 5, and the Lord God commanded them that they should repent. Pseudo-archaic texts do not have this kind of language either, and the biblical pattern is light in finite complementation. Wherefore was most heavily used in English during the first third of the early modern period. Its use in combination with additional archaism becomes quite rare, textually speaking. This is what we have in Moses 6. Wherefore, for this cause to keep the commandment, I speak forth these words. Cause in the phrase for this cause conveys an archaic meaning of purpose. This combined archaism is not in the Bible or pseudo-archaic texts, but it does occur twice in the Book of Mormon. Here are 2 early modern examples of this language. The first one shows obedience to a commandment, as we see in Moses 6. The nominative absolute construction was used at a higher rate in the early modern period, even though it persisted robustly into the modern period. There's one of these with wherefore in the Book of Moses. Wherefore Lamech, being angry, slew him. And one each in the Book of Mormon, the King James Bible, and the pseudo-archaic corpus. The one pseudo-archaic text that has this language was written by a Shakespeare expert, as shown at the bottom. Wherefore Benjamin, being a just man and a righteous. The archaism which thing, rather than just which, occurs 5 times in the Bible and 3 times in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Moses has one of these. Now for this once I know that man is nothing, which thing I never had supposed. There is only one instance in the pseudo-archaic corpus from the second oldest text, shown here. The last linguistic feature I will mention today is subordinate that usage, specifically after that and because that. Of course, the Bible and the original Book of Mormon text have many examples of both types. In fact, the Book of Mormon originally had more than 100 with after that, and more than 30 with because that. But none of the 25 pseudo-archaic texts has both types. The Book of Moses has 6 of these, 3 of each, as we can see on this slide in the following slide. So again, its English usage presents as something beyond a mere pseudo-archaic effort and impressively archaic. In conclusion, the Book of Moses has many different archaic linguistic features, including quite a few that I did not touch on here. Much of the archaism is not biblical, and as shown, some of it isn't even found in the Book of Mormon, which contains a wide variety of early modern usage. The Book of Mormon was the template for Joseph Smith, and he went beyond its archaism in a few ways, and he adopted a pattern that was harder to produce with personal relative pronouns, but did not adopt a pattern that was easier to produce with periphrastic did. The conclusion I draw from the linguistic evidence I've examined is that the Book of Moses was probably revealed to Joseph Smith word for word. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Carmack, for your presentation. I commend you for the work you have done, because I could honestly never do the detailed, sometimes tedious but valuable work you have produced for this presentation. I must admit, I'm sort of type A, and so I was always striving after A's in my university courses. But when I came to statistics, I thought, if I get a D in this class, I'll pass and get the credits I need. So doing this kind of work is very impressive to me, and I appreciate it. Hats off to you for conducting this linguistic analysis. You note in your abstract that it was unlikely that Joseph Smith was responsible for producing the pattern found in the Book of Moses, and that other archaic elements of the language did not derive from Joseph Smith's mind either. Consequently, you surmise Joseph Smith was not responsible for producing the pattern found in the Book of Moses. As well, you also point out certain similarities in language and certain distinctions in language in your linguistic analysis. Do the similarities and distinctions you identified suggest or indicate anything to you, or is that the work for another presentation?
Well, I need that clarified, I think. I'm not sure.
So when you talk about similarities as well as distinctions, can you just kind of describe for us, what are some of the similarities, what are some of the distinctions, and what that teaches us about these works, about what Joseph Smith was doing, or is that something that's, for another presentation, something that you did not focus on?
Yeah, I guess I would say that it's probably for another presentation.
Okay, all right. Here's a question from online. And a congratulatory remark. This is a very important presentation. For some of us who are non-specialists, we have a hard time seeing the forest for the trees. Can you sum up the 2 or 3 most important implications of your results in simple language? I think language for the layman.
Okay. Well, when we produce our syntax, we're thinking about the content of what we say and not about the patterns or structures that we learned growing up. Now, when pseudo-archaic authors are writing what they write, or Joseph Smith is a presumed pseudo-archaic author, then he would be trying to access that part of the brain where we normally leave to the subconscious or the non-conscious. So that then it becomes interesting to see what authors did who were trying to do exactly that. And in general, what I found in the Book of Mormon and Book of Moses is that the level of access to archaic language is extremely high. This is compared to, say, a pseudo-archaic author who knew Shakespeare very well. Both the Book of Moses and the Book of Mormon showed actually greater archaism than someone who was an expert in Shakespeare. That then suggests that it is not Joseph Smith who is doing that, because we would rightly assume, because he knew less earlier English than a Shakespeare expert, that he would not be able to do that naturally. We then conclude that it would be words that the Lord was providing him with, because the level of archaic usage is so high.
Thank you. So this was basically beyond his capacity to do what he did, is what you are sort of suggesting.
Yeah, that's right. And the pseudo-archaic authors give us that level. They provide us the information, the baseline of what might have been possible for Joseph Smith. If we assume that Joseph Smith is the very best pseudo-archaic author, we still do not rise to the level of what we see even in something as short as the Book of Moses, where you have a rather dense array of a wide variety of earlier usage.
Thank you. All right, another question. Many people worry about whether the new Joseph Smith section, JST sections of Genesis are closely related linguistically and stylistically to the Bible. Your study explicitly says it is different from Genesis. But in your research, did you contrast it with the New Testament Gospel of John, or is that for a future study?
I didn't specifically look at John, and I did not look beyond the Book of Moses. So I did not look at JST language beyond the Book of Moses. And I looked at the Bible in general, and most specifically at the Book of Genesis. But I did not focus in on the Book of John in the Gospels.
Thank you. In your conclusion, you state the original Book of Moses text was probably revealed to Joseph Smith word for word. Now, as I read that, you seem to be suggesting that each word he recorded was specifically given him through revelation from God. First of all, am I accurate in drawing this conclusion? And then secondly, if so, how did you come to this conclusion?
Yes, that's accurate. So the conclusion is that the Lord transmitted a prepared English language text, which might have been translated from an earlier text in another language, or it might have been produced without a translation. I did not explore that. I don't have an opinion on that at this time, but I would not rule either one out. And I would say that there is, in the text, there are places where you have original language interspersed with Genesis language. And then that tends to suggest that the entire text, even the Genesis material, would have been given to Joseph Smith as a revelation, as explicit words, rather than ideas, or rather than Joseph Smith opening a Bible to the book of Genesis. It's similar to what we see in the Book of Mormon, but in this case, Joseph Smith would have had to use a very carefully prepared Bible to get all the Genesis language as it is, and it's not paraphrastic, meaning it is quoting the book of Genesis in many cases, in the 28% of the book of Moses. It's direct quoting, and it is not just ideas that were revealed and Joseph Smith being very familiar with the Genesis language. And that's similar to what we see in many parts of the Book of Mormon. Now, the way I arrived at that was by comparing the syntax, doing a very close comparison, and comparing the syntax with everything I described at the beginning of the presentation, which is all the biblical syntax, Joseph Smith's own preferences, those structures that pseudo-archaic authors produced, and the greater textual record.
Okay. And I was going to ask a follow-up, but you sort of answered that question. I was going to play devil's advocate, because you also conclude that God revealed to Joseph Smith the text of the Book of Moses. But, you know, some people might ask, well, how can you assert that this is from God and not from, you know, a demonic source, or from Satan himself, or evil, you know, spirits at work on the prophet Joseph Smith? But I think that connection that you make between biblical language, which people do, believers, which people do accept as the word of God, perhaps helps substantiate your conclusion there. Is that the case?
Yeah, that sounds like as good as any explanation that we might come up with.
Great. Thank you very much. Again, we appreciate all your hard work and effort, and again, we look forward to seeing this in print.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.